everyone. Welcome to this conversation. I have with me Akash Bharadwaj, the face and mind behind this wonderfully curated Instagram page called Bihar Visual Archive. And we thought it would be interesting to have Akash to talk about his curatorial journey and just the labor and love behind pursuing this particular project. So thank you, Akash, for being a part of this.
Thank you, Pritha.
So before we begin, I'd like to give a brief introduction to Akash and his work. Akash is a PhD candidate at the Department of Archaeology at Shiv Nada University. His research focuses on curatorial practices and the histories of collections in the museums of Bihar. He has undertaken various projects working in archives and museums across India and the UK. He's currently engaged in developing a project aimed at archiving micro-histories and narratives about art, culture, and heritage of Bihar. So, yeah, just to start, how did this idea come about, let's say, to start something on Instagram?
Yeah, so this actually began in July 2021.
Mhm.
By that time, I had already been enrolled as a PhD student. I was doing this research, and that had to do a lot with the regional history of Bihar, looking at histories of museums and collecting practices in the region. And while doing this research, I was, encountering a lot of sort of micro histories, a
Mhm.
lot of archival material and sources that I was not particularly drawing on in my own research, PhD research. And at
Right.
the same time, I found it quite interesting.
Mhm.
And for me also, it was a kind of a revelation because I was not aware of this.
Mhm.
So, so the page began just like that. I thought, okay, there is something.
Mhm.
And maybe I was also looking at other people who were doing similar kind of work by that time. You had a lot of like Instagram pages
Right.
and so on. So one of the impetus for doing this project came from there.
Mhm.
And I think with time, it also began with this whole thing about representation of the region.
Mhm.
Because I remember while I was, writing a small essay um, on photographic practices in Bihar. Like
Right.
how do some of these young
Mhm.
contemporary photographers they look at the region and how do they represent it? And one of them, I was interviewing him, and he told me that, till now people were like always portraying Bihar in a certain light.
Mhm.
If you like go on Google and search Bihar, you will find these like very uh, images which
Right.
speak of poverty, which speak of like deprivation and so on. So we are trying to change that.
Mhm.
And if you look at their images, they are like very well
Mhm.
uh, shot images. They look very beautiful. But I sort of also found it, I because I think that this whole idea where you either talk about this region as this glorious entity or you just reduce it to, its bare minimum. So another reason that I began this Instagram page because I thought that it allows you to pick on different histories, and some histories might be, or some stories might be difficult, some might be, uh, some might have a very different side to them,
Mhm.
which could be inspiring, or there can be like a good combination of different things. So the page began like in that manner, and then gradually, sort of like over a time, it kind of progressed to where is it now?
Right. So, do you have a team behind it, or it's you most of the time doing? Sometimes I understand it's also collaborative. A lot other people have also contributed to it. Uh,
Yeah, so initially, like I was doing all the
mhm.
work. Beach mein, like in between, I took help. I take help of people.
Right.
Like sometimes they are like either friends or sometimes people I know.
Mhm.
Mostly, I've been doing it because one of the issues is also that to get a team or to build a team, you have to have
Mhm.
like to be more organized, or you have to have certain
Right.
resources as well
Mhm.
because you can't expect people to be working for just like that.
Right.
So that is there. But
Mm.
at the same time, now I think, yeah, as you said, that there is a lot of work that sometimes happens in collaboration.
Right.
So
Mm.
draw on other people's work, or you collaborate with them to like
Mm.
create certain content.
Right. And given that you are interested in this whole archiving process, what's something about this that appeals most to you? Like any part of it that you feel especially drawn to or gives you joy?
I think what partly helped me was that because I'm already pursuing my PhD,
Right.
and it's also I'm looking at a region which is like similar to what
Mhm.
I'm working on this page. So that kind of gave me an edge in terms of, okay, I was already doing that work, and then now I
Mhm.
kind of, for this particular
Mhm.
project, I kind of drew it from there.
Right.
But especially, it's interesting that of course a lot of like work, a lot of labor is put into to run a page like this.
Mhm.
But I think that because it has not been that strenuous, it has actually have enjoyed it.
Right.
Because also the thing is that it's not it doesn't have like
Mhm.
it's more like it began as a hobby, and
Mhm.
now kind of slowly I'm like trying to give it a structure.
Right. Right.
So the process is like, in that sense, it hasn't been like that difficult. It has been quite smooth.
Mhm.
And one of the things over a period of, I've realized that I think that, when one thinks of archiving, I think that also these couple of things, for instance, encounter
Mhm.
the chances, uh,
Right.
that chance, that serendipity,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
I find quite interesting, because over a period of time I've realized that now it's something which has become part of my sort of how I operate or how I work, because
Right.
whatever I'm doing, whether I'm reading or
Mhm.
even looking at social media, or like talking to people,
Mhm.
there's always this idea at the back of my head that, okay, this is a work that I'm doing, and
Right.
I need to have people, I need to know like who is doing what.
Right.
And so that, in that sense, there is a lot of work there,
Mhm.
but it also comes from this inner sort of, because you want to know, instinct,
Mhm.
because you want to know more about it. So it has become a method in that sense, and till now I think it's enjoyable. I don't know about the future,
Right.
but it it it's
Mhm.
been a good experience still.
Yeah, it's also something I mean, we also resonate with as a publication as well because for both me and my, co-founder, it's it's just the joy of continuing with this thing. Because a lot of times there was a time when we were working on this while having full-time jobs. So, but somehow it's kind of you think about it all the time and it sort of falls in place, I guess. Happens with any passion project, I think. So one interesting thing that you mentioned about while introducing this archive or briefly talking about it was how you get to learn and unlearn a region. What has been for you, let's say, something about that unlearning process? I mean, there are many, but if you could talk about a couple of points about that.
Yeah, and this happens very
Mhm.
frequently, and that
Right.
is what I think keeps me going.
Hmm.
Because, and that is what I think, my hunch is that that is what also interests people or the
Right.
audience or
Hmm.
whosoever is looking at
Hmm.
that content. Because I think we are fed so much of these stereotypes,
Right.
and we feel that we know, for that matter, any region
Hmm.
by
Hmm.
whatever certain, markers that are there.
Right.
Okay, this language is spoken,
Hmm.
and these are certain symbols, and those kind of, those kind of, that textbook history that one is
Hmm.
fed. And I think there is so much more there.
Hmm.
And so this project, in that sense, and sometimes I actually struggle with this idea that why Bihar? Like,
Right.
why do you have to focus on one particular region?
Hmm.
And uh, so, but at the same time, what I have now sort of come to terms with, and
Mm,
what I try and think through, is that it's not, Bihar is not like in that sense just a geography. Like
mm,
it's a geography, it's a state and so on. But I think for me, while doing this project, it has also become a method, in the sense that
right.
how it's not only like there are people from who are connected to
Mhm.
region, but they exist outside Bihar.
Yeah.
Or there are
Mhm.
people I see, and sometimes I wonder, like there are many people who are not from Bihar per se, like
Mhm.
they are from somewhere else and they are interested in that
Right.
history of the region.
Mhm.
So that I find it quite interesting, because I think that, the moment you throw certain name, for instance, Bihar Visual Archive, that the initial feeling is that, okay, it's region
Mhm.
specific.
Right. Right.
So one of the things that I've also been trying to do, and like thinking how to do it, is that
Mhm.
how does one talk about a region not as some, like in very
Mhm.
like narrow sectarian terms, but how do you open it up in connection to other regions and the world?
Right. Right.
Because now we see, especially the project on migration that we did, we
Mhm.
realized that, okay, that's a very interesting avenue through which we can like
Mhm.
talk about
Right.
Bihar or the region in relation to many other spaces. So in that sense, like, there has been a lot of
Mhm.
unlearning as well.
Right.
And but at the same time, there are also like other issues. For
Mhm.
instance, I think language.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
so you realize that there are many different languages people speak, or you might, it's better if you like produce content
Mhm.
which can be in those different languages. But those are things which are like very difficult to do. So at times you have this understanding, that, these are the limitations, but you're not
Mhm.
quite, it's difficult to like uh, deal with that.
Right. Yeah, this is something quite interesting. You talk about like opening up the region beyond its geographic boundaries, because I think again, when one thinks about Bihar and let's say if one were to think about migration, it's always, I think, largely the discourse is surrounding labor. But then I think a lot of times how a region exists in other places is also in terms of its culture, let's say, or how it's shaping up in a different place where you have people from this region going there. Right. So, another point sort of connected to this was uh, any glaring blind spot that you feel, uh, let's say, while you were working on the stories or the tidbits that you've covered for this page, that you feel that you would want to explore. Let's say if I could talk about like a particular aspect.
I think it's not so much about the lack of uh, information or lack
Right.
of literature.
Mhm.
But I think one of the things that I have kind of observed, and I feel right now, is that when I
Mhm.
began this project, I was in Delhi, I was doing my
Right.
uh, PhD research. Until now, I have been sort of, I go there, I go for my field work and go
Mhm.
for a couple of days, come back. And one of the things I feel is that I would want to do certain things in a manner
Mhm.
which would require me to be there for longer period of time.
Right.
And that
Mhm.
I feel is very important,
Mhm.
not only to like think about content, but
Mhm.
also like where are you deriving that content from, and
Oh.
who are you like kind of disseminating it
Mhm.
to.
Mhm.
So those kind of connections, I think that we are yet to like sort of work on.
Right.
And yeah, other blind spots, as in I think something is, what I have also observed is that, like if you think, one of the, again, I think it also connects to why this page, or what does it
Mhm.
intend to do finally, is that if you look at many like southern states, for instance,
Mhm.
they have a very vibrant and strong media ecosystem, the kind of the literature they
Right.
produce. And so there are institutions, there are publication
Mm,
houses, these kind of things are there.
mm,
But I think what I've noticed, especially in relation to states like Bihar, is that you don't have that ecosystem.
mm. Right.
So it's always you're relying on national media and those big sort of
Mm,
centers in other parts of the country, which is
right.
fine. But at the same time, I think that one has to have this local sort of vibrant
Mm,
um, scene in terms of
mm,
like
mm.
not only writing but also like publishing and producing. And
Yeah, the
we don't
infrastructure
have
of
a
it. Yeah.
yeah, that infrastructure is not there. We
Mm,
don't have a I mean, we don't have a film institute in the whole of the state. I
yeah.
mean, that's like I think in the 21st century or whatever, 2025.
Mm,
In
right.
so those are, I think, those are things that we need to work on as
Mm,
a collective.
right. This again takes me to the next question, which is about curation. It's so interestingly, yesterday I came across this article in New York Times. It was talking about how curation has become such a mainstream jargon, especially with social media, that everybody is
That's true.
trying, like you have a Instagram page and everybody says this is a curated or someone's curation. So there's actually an interesting paragraph in the article that talks about how this word's overuse has almost left it devoid of meaning. The fact that it's used anywhere and everywhere because it just sounds fashionable or aesthetically conscious. And then the article proceeds to say that curation is not just about choosing. A curator is also a catalyst, a motivator. So what do you have to say about this? Like this idea that curation has become like a mainstream jargon.
Yeah, it's an interesting question and interesting like uh, it's like if I answer like part
Mm,
wise, I would say that yeah, curation has become just one of these words that everybody and anybody
mm,
using it. And at the same time, I feel that there is also a reason for that. I mean,
mm,
the uh, the reason that why curation has become so important right now,
mm.
because on Instagram only, if you see, there are like thousands of
Right, yeah,
pages.
right.
Like Bihar only, I see there is a page for each district.
Okay. Wow.
So I think that because the flow of information is so much, there's so
Mm,
much information
mm,
and there's so much clutter that that curation has become important.
mm.
Now, many people might be using it or deploying it for different ends, like that we
Right.
can have a debate on what is a
Mm,
good curation, what is a bad curation. But I think fundamentally, this whole desire to curate, I think, comes from there
mm,
in a way, especially today. And I think, yeah, I agree that curation is something that should not. It's just not a kind of thing that you place somewhere. It has to have that kind of a force
mm,
which can, uh, which uh, which becomes a catalyst for some change or something. It's something. Curation is an act that would trigger
right.
a thought
Mm,
or some kind of a conversation. That I feel is very important, and especially if you look at museums
mm,
uh, in India and the way they have been curating. So one of the I think that fundamental sort of mode has been that this chronological construction of history.
right.
So it's
Mm,
basically you tell about the nation's
mm,
past or the region's past in a very like sort of chronological. Has been a very little focus on storytelling, which is
right.
now kind of partially it is happening in many
Mm,
different spaces.
mm,
And I think I also look at for this particular page, also one of the primary this thing is that how do you engage people? How do you
mm,
put up something which kind of which forces people to like uh, engage with it at some
mm,
level,
mm,
and it is not like it's also a kind of curation which is like which cuts across genres and
Right.
it cuts across like. So I sometimes also try and do it like sometimes in Hindi, sometimes in English.
Hmm. Right.
That variation is there.
Hmm.
Sometimes you talk about like from books to films. So that kind of right now I don't like put a lot of investment.
Hmm.
Like I don't decide what is going to be the curatorial sort of the mandate or what is the
Right.
what should be
Hmm.
the the strategy for it. It's something
Hmm.
which comes on its own. But I do feel that over a period of time there has to be like uh, more thinking along those lines in terms of how do you like
Right.
for curation. I think accessibility, all these questions of
Hmm.
accessibility, questions of uh, recognizing difference and diversity, uh,
Right.
those are like very important factors.
Hmm.
And unless and until we do that, and so for instance, there is also this, I don't know if I should mention it or not, but for instance, there was this image that I put up of Sajjal Imam,
Hmm.
who comes from
Yeah.
Bihar. He has been an activist. Right now, he's in jail.
Hmm.
And the thing is that when you do something of that sort, you are obviously once you think about it. Oh,
Right.
it might trigger certain
Hmm.
reactions within the
Hmm.
kind of audience that you may have.
Right.
So those are also but one does it because I mean that's only when you get a sense of okay,
Hmm.
how do people react or what is their opinion or what is their assessment. So curation, I think that way is also very challenging, and it's
Hmm.
always a process where you like include certain things and exclude certain things.
Right.
And I think the least we can do in this practice is that
Hmm.
be transparent about it, at least,
Yeah.
even if we are not like
Hmm. Yeah. And sure,
including it.
with curation, I think there's also a certain sense of the self as well that comes up. I think it's not as objective as maybe one would think of, let's say,
That's true.
that, okay, uh, you would want to, like the whole point of, or maybe let's say the reason why gaps exist in archives again is because archiving or curation isn't quite as objective as people think it to be. So let's say somebody decides to exclude something, and then somebody else, decides to fill in those gaps. So I think that's also, s- yeah, something to be kept in mind when one thinks of curation, maybe. Right. And you've also been talking about engaging people about, regarding a project like this. So any community engagement, let's say, that you've done through this project you would want to talk about?
I think people have been appreciative of
Mm.
the of a page like this.
Mhm.
And in terms of engagement, I would say that there is this, and I mean, we also have to, what I said earlier as well, that, this is happening online. I mean, this
Mhm.
is at the end
Right.
of the day, a digital space, which is
Mhm.
also there. It's not a physical space
Mhm.
as much as we would like it to be.
Right.
But so a lot of the way the communication or that engagement
Mhm.
that happens is also happens because the way that
Mhm.
platform is built.
Right.
And I think that while it is a very good medium to like sort of
Mhm.
engage with audience or like disseminate certain kind of ideas,
Mhm.
at the same time I think that it has its own limitation as well.
Right.
And that is why what I was saying earlier, that
Mhm.
that community engagement where you uh, like are there,
Mhm.
you are working with the community, like there is that
Right.
sense of like the physical proximity as well.
Mhm.
I think that is very important, and that I have not been able to do as
Mhm.
of now on that at that uh, scale.
Right.
And that is something that I have been also thinking about it.
Mhm.
And that I think is also something which would require, uh, because I think it's one. thing to like when people are appreciative, but at the same time, the way I see it is that the engagement also has to be with groups,
Hmm.
with, it has to be long term. It
Right.
has to have a kind of an impact where people can like, that it, something more has to be there.
Hmm. Right.
And I've been thinking about it, for instance, young people uh, in the region,
Hmm.
uh, because we know that the university system is not good. We know that, whatever the basic requirements that are there,
Hmm.
so the institutions there are not performing that well. So that I've been thinking like in what ways then can one like conceive uh, projects which
Hmm.
can then create some kind of a conversation
Right.
uh, there. And I also feel that especially in relation to Bihar and all, for instance people like us who migrate
Hmm.
to whatever for education, and then there are people there, and that dialogue and that conversation that doesn't happen
Right.
between like,
Hmm.
so those are the things that are there on my mind, and that's I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Taking this forward, I was actually thinking because some kind of website that comes out of it would be a really good idea. Are you also thinking along those lines, just to take it, forward from Instagram, this whole project?
Yeah, that's on my mind, and I
Hmm.
think that but for that to take up, I think it's very important that there is also a group of people,
Hmm.
who like take up
Right.
certain responsibilities. And I
Hmm.
think that I do feel that the website is very important because, again, I think
Hmm.
that a lot of work that has been done now on Instagram is useful, but Instagram has its own sort of,
Right.
there is it's a platform, it's a unique
Hmm.
platform,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of things that cannot be like done here. For
Hmm. Right.
instance, if you want to do textual uh, engagement, there
Hmm.
is a limited scope for that, or you can do it in
Right.
a different way, but you
Hmm.
cannot fully explore the medium on
Right.
Insta. So because of that, and at the same time, I think also to uh, build certain thematic
Hmm.
clusters around which one can, then like work in a more organized manner.
Right.
So I think for that, website is must,
Hmm.
and so that has been there, and I think what that would also help in uh, creating a better engagement, because I think that there's only limited work that I can do as an individual. But only when like everybody comes together, there are people writing, there are people like actively participating, then I think
Hmm.
uh, it will create much more impact, and it will be much more useful.
Right.
So that is definitely there.
Hmm.
And also one of the things that I've been thinking about it is that, in terms of archiving,
Hmm.
it's what has been done till now is that you draw on the archive. Yeah, you draw on the existing archive. So, for
Hmm.
instance, something is there, and I draw on those stories which are there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I feel that to create or maintain an archive, one also has to actively like create
Right.
collections,
Hmm.
like make collections anew or fresh. And for that, also, I think it's very important that we shift to uh, a website, a more slightly more formal space,
Hmm.
so that we could do some of these things.
Yeah. And yeah, make it more organized and uh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about the medium, I was also curious to know if, the whole, Instagram algorithm, was it ever something that bothered you? Or because I understand with passion projects like this, it's, for example, if we were to talk about Tenopus, initially, yes, I was a little caught up with. oh, we need to have these many followers or whatever. And obviously, the number of people who follow you, gives you a certain kind of boost, and you feel that, okay, this number
True.
has to keep rising. But then I think after a point, we also realize that, if it's something that you are doing on your own, or let's say with a very small team, right? And social media requires a lot of time, like just just putting up a post and everything that goes behind it is just uh, I mean, of course, established organizations would have Google Forms for even a single post that they put up on Insta. So after a point, yeah, I just gave up on that race. I was like, I don't have to care about how many people follow or whatever, because if you get sucked into the game of numbers, then it's a different thing. Because I've also heard a lot of people, let's say now, who are maybe let's say the influencer kind, who also say that cringe is something that sells well on Insta. So a lot of people get into that whole thing, and then after they've built the base, they start doing other kind of work. But yeah, you have to keep feeding the algorithm. So uh, yeah, what's been your engagement with Instagram been like?
Yeah, well, I think that is certainly there. I think
Mm.
it would be wrong on my part to say that these things are certainly like they are very important. And I have like thought through
Mhm.
this
Yeah,
fair
we
bit of,
definitely get bothered by it. I mean, even though
yeah, you
one
definitely get
doesn't
bothered.
want to, like, while I'm saying this also, I would still think, oh, I wish, we had more followers or whatever. It's a thought that doesn't leave you really, and you can't be like, oh, it doesn't affect me at all.
And I think, there is a catch there as well, because
Mhm.
I think that while it is true that you might get sucked in that kind of a system where, you want more followers or you want more likes, but at the same time, that is clearly also a kind of a, in that particular space, a kind of a uh, marker through which you understand that, okay, these many
Mhm.
at one level,
Yeah.
at a surface level, I feel.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, this algorithm things is, I mean, these things are there. And I think that, you, and sometimes it also pushes you in a way that,
Mhm.
should you be creating a certain kind of content because
Right.
there is a high possibility that it might be liked by more number of people and
Mhm. Yeah.
it might draw in like more people. And I wouldn't say that I completely work against it.
Mhm.
That a thought that goes in, then, and but I would also say that I try and maneuver through it or kind of negotiate with it,
Right.
because what I feel is that because I'm working in a particular ecosystem, then I have to have more like, I have to have that those people also,
Mhm.
but at the same time I do not completely want to like give away in terms of what
Right.
I think is very important to do.
Mhm.
So certain kind of stories and that are important to do, and that I think interestingly it's also rewarding sometimes,
Mhm.
because there, I mean, and it happens in any work that you do, that there is obviously there is this kind of expectation that you should follow this template and then something will happen
Right.
which will work in your favor.
Mhm.
But I think many a times, and all of us know that what happens is that you work against the template and then also
Sure.
those
Yeah.
things happen. So I so that way I think that it's slightly complex as well.
Mhm.
Like there's no easy answer. But I would say that in terms of what sometimes I also do as a matter of strategy is that you do sometimes put up things which are easier
Mhm.
to kind of
Right.
you know digest in a manner,
Mhm.
and easy to like understand, sometimes like more like along those lines, which is like you don't have to basically put a lot of your brain there. You can
Right.
just like, which is there, these kind of spaces
Mhm.
are like that.
Right.
But at the same time, so I also try and do this, balance
Mm-hmm.
whereby sometimes you have content which is slightly more uh, which also like for me it takes time to like prepare that, and
Right.
at times there are things which are like slightly easier, which is more like more I would say that spontaneous in that
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
think that it's a balance of the both.
right. Yeah, like you said, sometimes you don't know how, like a post suddenly getting the kind of traction you thought it wouldn't. So yeah, that's internet always has that surprise element, I think, especially with spaces like
Yeah.
this. Coming to another project that I found really interesting, was the calendar for this year. So if you could talk about how you came up with the idea of making those posters.
That is something that uh, yeah, so it's basically that is something that we did, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I, along with a group of people, like I took
Right.
help from
Mm-hmm.
uh, people, and that was something which was like
Yeah, that was quite
creating,
interesting. Yeah, the poster idea.
yeah, and I think that idea again came from that I, while doing this, searching
Mm-hmm.
internet while looking at books and journals and so on, I found that a lot of people, and by people I mean, for instance, writers or uh, historical figures
Mm-hmm.
in arts, literature,
Right.
many of these, there are no interesting photographs, so there are no good quality images
Right.
which are there in the public
Mm-hmm.
domain.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, many of these like institutions and archives also, they don't have that collection, or even if it's there, I think it's not easily
Available.
accessible,
Mm-hmm.
available. So I thought of, I was just like, it was a very simple exercise of thinking about people who have contributed to
Mm-hmm.
the history of the region. And just like, so I took help from an artist friend and I asked her to like illustrate
Mm-hmm.
these figures. So till now we have like, and initially it kind of began in a chronological manner where I started from the 19th century. Okay, who were the people? For instance, Sadasima
Right.
Pati or Hari Thakur. Uh, all these figures began, and I thought, okay, we'll bring it to the contemporary times, and
Mm-hmm.
while doing that, we will like create that series
Right.
and of people,
Mm-hmm.
and that was also very surprising because while doing this research, for instance, I came across figures like Jamala. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know about her and the kind of works she has done. And whosoever I have spoken to, not many people know about her
Mm-hmm.
work. But at the same
Right.
time, her work in ornithology and
Mm-hmm.
like studying the biodiversity, especially of the Palamu region, has been phenomenal. She has written so many essays and articles to these natural history journals and so on. And I don't think that, and we have a couple of very interesting write-ups on Jamal Ara, but at the same time, I think that her work has not been fully explored yet. And
Right.
I believe her private papers are in NCBS Bangalore.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also something that one could perhaps try and like do some research on that collection. So while doing this project, these are also the things that are happening that many times I don't know a lot
Mm-hmm.
about these figures, and then you come to know about it, and then you search for it, and then you realize that okay, there's not enough material that is available.
Right.
So so it's just that this one particular exercise, it opens up many different avenues.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, while doing this, we have also been thinking about how can we like like use it to create an awareness
Mm-hmm.
uh, among, let's say, for instance, young children, youth. Especially I
Right.
was thinking of these community libraries, that what if like if one could design sort of game
Mm-hmm.
based on this different parts
Right.
and do something with that. So those are the possibilities uh,
Mm-hmm.
that we are kind of thinking through. And in that sense, it has been very rewarding. And calendar and some of these things are like also a kind of an offshoot of that
Mm.
we are doing. We're trying, and so that more and more people kind of are able to relate to it or have these things. One of
Mm.
the reasons that we also thought of doing that in the form of postcards and calendars is that because I think that materiality also matters. And once
Right.
you have something, you know, which is there on your desk or which is there around you, and so there are more chances that other people might see. I think that the materiality is also something very important because we thought
Mm.
that if you have those like calendars around you or those
Right.
postcards that some other people might they might get curious, and
Mm.
that kind of gives you that it's useful in that sense.
Right.
So that was the thinking.
Okay. Thank you again so much for agreeing to be a part of this. And we hope that we get to see Bihar Visual Archive beyond Instagram as well. So all the best with that.
Thank you, Pritha. Yeah, it in fact like it also gave me an opportunity to
Mhm.
think about it and reflect on what I have been doing for some years now. And yeah, let's hope so.